all the way my Savior leads me. Cheers each winding path I tread, gives me grace for every trial, feeds me with the living bread.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Chester ARP Church Devotional Podcast. I'm Clint Davis. You know what we do. Read the Bible. We discuss it. Isaiah 28. This is the third podcast on Isaiah 28. Why do we spend so much time in Isaiah 28? I think it's been a helpful chapter for us to understand God judging Israel, God judging Jerusalem. And then today we kind of talk about the strangeness of God's work. Because, you know, when God judges his people, it may come across as strange to us. In fact, God says that. Look in verse 21, he talks about it takes time to do his deed. It's as strange as his deed. And to work his work, alien is his work. And I think sometimes when God works in our lives, especially in ways that we don't expect or in ways that we think he shouldn't be working, ways that are confusing, it seems alien and strange to us. And verses 23 through the end of the chapter really help, I think, explain that. So here's what God says. Give ear and hear my voice. Give attention and hear my speech. Does he who plows for sowing plow continually? Does he continually open and harrow his ground? When he has leveled his surface, does he not scatter deal and sow cumin and put wheat in rows, and barley in its proper place, and emmer at its border? For he is rightly instructed, his God teaches him. Deal is not threshed with a threshing sledge, nor is a cart wheel rolled over cumin, but deal is beaten out with a stick, and cumin with a rod. Does one crush grain for bread? No, he does not thresh it forever. When he drives his cart wheel over it with its horses, he does not crush it. This also comes from the Lord of hosts. He is a wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom. See, what God's doing here is he's saying this judgment that's going to come on you, this discipline, may seem strange and odd. And when you read it, you think it might be strange and odd. Maybe when you experience hardship and difficulty, you experience God's silence in your life, you might experience something extremely difficult, and you don't understand why you're dealing with it. You may deal with the consequences of sins and choices that you made years ago, but now they're coming to haunt you. And so you're sitting there going, why am I enduring this? What is going on? This is strange. This is alien, because God is supposed to care for his people. God's supposed to love his people. God's not supposed to do these things. And what the Bible teaches us here is that God does love Israel. God does love Judah. And the reason we know that is because he is choosing to discipline them and correct them and to bring them back to himself. And so he says, you know, there are times in your life, right? A farmer understands this. There are times when a field has to be plowed under. There are times when the land has to be opened. But once it's done, it's not going to continue on forever. Once it's done, then it's time to scatter the seed. The seed has to be scattered. And once the seed is scattered, then it has to sprout. And it has to grow. And then it has to grow to maturity. Then it has to produce fruit. Then that fruit has to be harvested. And then when that fruit is harvested, it's going to be harvested in different ways, right? And so he talks about the difference between the way you harvest dill and cumin, the way you harvest grain, and how you're going to not thresh it and crush it. You're going to put it through a process to separate the wheat from the chaff, as it were. You're going to put it through a process that you can get what is profitable and good from that grain and what needs to be brought out in that cumin and that spice, or in that dill and that spice, or in that grain that makes that bread, right? But you don't want to destroy it. And so a farmer understands not only does the field have to be plowed and the seed has to be planted and it has to be watered and it has to be fertilized and it has to be given time to grow, it has to be harvested and it has to be dealt with properly after it's harvested. And it is all according to the plan of the farmer to produce the greatest yield that he can produce, the most effective yield that he can produce to accomplish the greatest ends and the greatest produce. And so that's what God is doing with Israel, and that's what God is doing in your life, and that's what God is doing in my life. It may seem strange for seasons. When God has to plow the soul of Clint's heart out, it's strange, and it feels weird, and it hurts, because that's tough. Then there are times when God's sowing seed, and that seed is not showing much fruit. It's under the ground, but God's working, and He's growing that seed. And then there are times when He's watering, and there's a lot of growth. And there are times when there's a harvest, and fruit's being produced, and then it's got to be harvested, and then we've got to go through that process of being refined in the proper way. It may seem strange, may seem alien to us. But we can trust that our God knows what He's doing. For these words, this is also comes from the Lord of hosts. He is wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom. His wisdom is wonderful. His counsel is excellent. And as such, He is doing it in perfect timing, according to His perfect will, to engage and to ensure that He's going to have the most effective produce and the most effective product to accomplish His will on this earth. And so He's working in your life. He's working in my life. He's working in the life of the Christians. He's working in the life of the church. Praise be to God for that. He is telling this church, this group of people in Israel and Judah, they're going to endure what seems to be strange and alien times, but it's all within the purpose of God to ensure that He is able to produce the most glorious and wonderful fruit in the long term for the glory of His kingdom. Hey, I hope you guys understand that. See yourself in that capacity. See yourself as God is at work in your life and understand it that way. You guys take care. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.
You carry me close to your heart, and surely your goodness and mercy will follow.